Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. As-salatu was-salam ala ashraf al-anbiya wal mursaleen Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ahlihi wa sahbihi ajma'in wa min istana bis-sunnati ila yawm ad-din. Assalamu alaikum. It's a weekday, it's a Monday. But anyhow, we have important things to talk about. And today's topic is to talk about creating an environment in the American society in which Islam and Muslims have authenticity, where they are valid and vital and vibrant. The rise of religious intolerance, Islamophobia, hate, racism is taking more lives and threatening the safety of more and more people in our cities, our towns, and our neighborhoods than ever before. Mass shootings, police brutality, and a media bent on painting an entire people evil, either by their race or faith. And that is a society that is indicative of one that is in danger of losing the principles of its own civil rights. That was last year. Now we got a political climate that we're knee-deep in that has taken that from last year, and we are now walking into a situation that is extremely problematic, not just for us, but for this entire society. And we have to recognize that the accusations of calling Islam and Muslims a political ideology is serious. We can be identified by our politics. It is unconstitutional to be asked your faith and your religion. You can register and be registered as a political ideology, but you cannot be registered as a faith group. And so there is an agenda out there. I believe that faith communities, and I'm going to talk to you about interfaith work. I believe, and I've experienced this, I've been working in interfaith for 25 years. I believe that faith communities must unite and take back what is wholesome and what is pure and bring back some peace and harmony. We are a faith community. Our world is suffering, not just us. There's so many other ramifications that we're going to be facing. There's violence and religious intolerance, yes, and hate and racism, and these are the critical issues that are suffocating our society. Faith communities must collaborate to address those, but also we must to alleviate the effects of poverty, income inequality, mass incarcerations, immigration injustice, the refugee crisis, corporate control of the media, global warming, and even the food we eat. Working together requires mutual understanding and respect. But when we can work together with mutual understanding and respect, then we can be authenticated and valued. And we need to work at authenticating Islam in the religious fabric of America, but we need to work at authenticating your presence. You have the right to be in the lead on these issues. You have the duty to be in the lead on these issues. Globalization and the media have centered a secular materialistic worldview that reacts to and sensationalizes differences rather than embracing our diversity and affirming our coexistence among all people and all faiths. Political tensions and nationalistic agendas have brought continuing these things, violence and poverty and significant human rights violations, in greater ways than ever before. And people of the faith communities, this is why I believe, people who love, people who know compassion, people who can understand hitting rock bottom and coming out because of a faith experience. These faith communities must fend off the dichotomous approach of political ideologies, the us versus them dichotomy, in order to create an environment where justice and safety is afforded to all. The Quran addresses humanity. O mankind, behold, you have been created out of a male and a female, and you have been made into nations and tribes so that you may know one another. Verily, the noblest of you in the sight of God is the one who is deeply God conscious. Behold, God is all-knowing and all-aware. I believe that faith and truer faith practices transcend the disturbing phenomenon of religious intolerance, discrimination, and violence. It's necessary for all faiths to communicate with one another on these points, to establish joint practices which honor our diverse communities and our coexistence, and honor our cooperation to come to know one another. Brian D. McLaren wrote a book. It's called Why Did Jesus, Moses, the Buddha, and Muhammad Cross the Road? Bringing to mind that old anti-humor, why did the chicken cross the road? Depends who you ask. Shakespeare might have said that's not the question. Newton might have said, did the chicken really cross the road, or did the road move beneath the chicken? But it reminded me of a verse in the Quran. It's in Surah Al-Baqarah, and it says that all of you faith communities have a direction to which you face. So race all of you together towards all that is good. I believe here Allah is telling us not to race against one another, but to race encouraging one another, to race to only those things that are good. And He's talking to people of different faiths, because you know this was God's plan. He could have made us all the same. From His grand wisdom, we don't know exactly, but I know that it makes me a better person, because I've never met a person I didn't know who didn't make me better when I met them, when I discovered who they are, when I found out their name and their story and who they were. Somebody who was very different than me. So why did Jesus, Moses, the Buddha, and Muhammad alayhi salatu salam cross the road? It's utilizing that infamous anti-joke, but it was to elicit a simple but meaningful response so that they could cross together. When we cross together, we are validating each other, authenticating each other. And so I believe fully that Muslims will become part and parcel, will become the deepest, strongest threads in the fabric of the religious fabric of America eventually. We have the potential. We have that desire, and we have that command to serve man. I want to bring your attention to the Interfaith Symposium that's going to take place tomorrow. It's a parallel track. I've had the awesome and daunting experience of chairing the track. We're bringing, like last year, people from different faith communities to talk to American Muslims. Some parts of the track are open to the general public, and you'll find that in the program booklet. But there is a luncheon tomorrow with keynote speaker Imam Omar Suleiman, and there are still a few seats available if you want to try to register for that luncheon. Our booth is in the bazaar. It's booth 420. I'm going to read you a little excerpt of the program for tomorrow. Interfaith has been growing in popularity these days, more out of a need to understand, but recently out of a need to face hate and bigotry with a solid front. Confusion and questions arise. What is interfaith? What is it not? Is it for leaders, institutions, or for the common person? What is the potential, and does it really have any potential for changing the intense religious intolerances and bigotry that we're facing here in America? This past election cycle stirred to life some once hidden and lost my place. You know what it has to do with? I have trifocals and age. It's difficult to stay focused. So this past election cycle has stirred to life some once hidden prejudices, intolerances, and Islamophobia has all the earmarkings of racism, which is provoked by a biased media and has been heightened exclusionary beliefs that we don't belong. It's calling for a Muslim registry to try to see if whether or not we deserve to be here. And some American, however, much of it is based on ignorance and fear for sure. Interfaith efforts, however, work to reduce this tension and convert not faith, but behaviors, so that we grow into a people of a steadfast mutual respect, a people of compassion, understanding, and support for one another. For it is at that plateau where we can work together to bring about the betterment for society, free of discrimination, prejudice, and social injustices, but also that of strength, determination, and unity in order to combat the disparities that we are all suffering in education, healthcare, and an ever-growing socioeconomic divide. I hope that you can understand that interfaith circles have developed over the years to a point where they're the ones that reach into the heart of America. Civic engagement is needed, for sure. But the things that really change the temperature of people is people who are looked at as sincere and compassionate and understanding and have a sense of respecting one another, and that they look, their arms and hearts are open to know one another. Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum.
The question is, are critics of interfaith have said, this is for you, Sister Karen, that the critics of interfaith work say that it isn't permissible to be in a setting where individuals are discussing clear statements and beliefs that go against Islam. For example, when Christians speak about Jesus as the Son of God, how do you respond to those critics? So there's some who have questions about interfaith, what is actually interfaith? Is it about just discussing things that are about religion, or is it about doing things together, or et cetera?
Okay, that's a good question. It's actually like sort of skimming the edge of what the criticisms are of interfaith work. Some of the criticisms go much, much deeper, but let me address this issue really clearly. Some criticism to interfaith in general, and we're not just talking about Muslim, Christian, Muslim, Jewish, Muslim, to the greater spectrum or diversity of faith groups in America, but we're talking about when its origins, its history. When Christians, with the countless number of denominations that there are, began doing interfaith work, and that's where the word comes from, where they began doing interfaith work together, they didn't have a problem sharing prayers together. Typically, their doctrines were similar enough that they would still address God in the same way, and so they had no problem blending their supplications, their dua together. Enter Jews or enter Muslims or even enter any of the other faith groups. Now there's a problem. So I believe that, yes, interfaith dialogue needs to evolve, where everybody at the table comes to the table with their own identity and they do not have to compromise any of their principles from their faith backgrounds. I still get invited to groups where somebody will say, everybody rise at the end. And I'm like, what on earth, really? But it takes time to get people to change their ways, change how they see everybody, that you don't have to assimilate. And it's only going to happen when we rise up from within our own community, people who are competent in faith practices, that and have the voice and the in some cases audacity to say, I'm sorry, I don't pray that way, or do you mind if I pray my own prayer? Would you like to hear that? And share it in this way. I've been in an 18-year-long Muslim Women's Dialogue. We never once shared our prayers. We instead have chosen for 18 years to listen to each other's prayers and look for what I can benefit from hearing how they pray, and what they benefit from hearing how I pray. So that's one example. Another example, and this is where we get deeper into the big criticisms of interfaith dialogue, and I have been fighting for a very long time. It is the dialogue between Muslims and Jews. This creeping normalcy and faith-washing objectives that has been going on for the past couple of decades, but more so in the last 6 years or so, is clearly tied in with the Islamophobic network. Has anybody seen CARE's new report? It just came out. CARE National has a new report called Islamophobia, Addressing the Issues of Islamophobia. It's a 2016 report where it clearly identifies the leaders that were identified earlier as the dirty dozen, but where the money is going and who's promoting all that Islamophobic network. So those who are working in the Creeping Normalcy Project, that is about bringing the narrative, the Israeli Zionist narrative, into interfaith work slowly, while faith washing or removing and diminishing the Palestinian narrative, or even the Muslim narrative on Palestine, away. So that's the creeping normalcy and the faith washing, pulling it away, under the guise of, we don't talk politics. It's absolutely ridiculous, and this is more discomforting. And so I'm going to tell you something. Last year, when I was asked to chair the Interfaith Symposium for the MAS-ICNA Convention, I was ready to take all my faith leaders to the stage without a Jewish component, because I was unwilling to allow somebody who is practicing or promoting faith washing or creeping normalcy projects or agendas. And 1 week beforehand, I finally got Jewish Voice for Peace, which is an anti-Zionist organization, to say, hey, we have a council of rabbis. Would you like to have one of our council of rabbis? And we brought in, hence beginning our dialogue with Jewish Voice for Peace. Now, I've been sort of in and out of dialogue circles with Jewish communities, which have been very problematic. And it really does wash away our narrative. It's also got an agenda arm which trains our Muslim youth through a program called the Muslim Leadership Initiative that teaches these young people who are up-and-coming activists or leaders in our communities to set aside Palestine, to set aside the Islamic objective and principles about Palestine. And not only that, but to set aside our ideas of social justice as well. And it's always these agendas to try to brainwash have deeply affected and infected interfaith dialogue for the past decade. I am here to tell you, yes, that is happening. And so tomorrow's Interfaith Symposium, because we've been developing a very deep interfaith relationship with Jewish Voice for Peace for the past year, they're a part of our symposium tomorrow. At 10 a.m., we have a session in the Dawah track that talks about faith washing and creeping normalcy with Leslie Williams, who is one of the deputies of Jewish Voice for Peace here in Chicago. Tomorrow evening on the main stage, we will have a spectrum of interfaith participants, a panel, in which JVP Rabbi Elisa Weiss, who is an anti-Zionist rabbi, will also be present. On Wednesday at 10 a.m., and you can find this in the program, look on the online app, because that's the one that gets updated. If you see my name, you'll also find that that's where it is. So we have Rabbi Brant Rosen, who lost his congregation in his synagogue. They kicked him out because of his position on Palestine and his position with Muslims. So these are very amazing. Yeah, now I'm being told I've self-promoted. Interfaith Symposium, if you want to ask me more about it, there's trainings, there's discussions and opportunities to get in.
Thank you very much.